This is American Dreams, a program where we interview thought leaders and entrepreneurs and bring their ideas to you in real-world context. Welcome to American Dreams. My guest today is Rick Swart. Welcome.
Nice to be here again, Alan.
So, Rick, you got a wealth of experience from running an entrepreneurship center at the school, at Berkeley, the Haas School of Business, and in addition to that, family office advisor. I've been involved in some real innovative programs, and so today I like to focus in on what brought you up to where you are today, and maybe you can take us through your timeline of in your career.
I'll try to make it fast. I originally started off life as an academic studying information systems, and then I was invited to join a startup, and my wife thought I was crazy leaving academia for a startup. But after about 18 months, we had an exit, and I sort of got the entrepreneurial fever and was involved in a couple of other startups. They weren't as successful as the first, but that's oftentimes the road you travel as an entrepreneur. I then got very interested in how to help other entrepreneurs, sort of going back to my business school professor origins, and spent quite a bit of time studying and working with groups that were helping entrepreneurs and setting entrepreneurial policy. One was Alan Hall in Utah had a group called Grow America Ventures, which is very, very similar to what Steve Case now has, Rise of the Rest, a very similar model. In fact, I was part of Steve Case's Startup America partnership program as well. So I spent a lot of time nationally working on entrepreneurship. Did a lot of work in Washington, D.C. on policy. Basically was one of the key organizers of the crowdfunding industry. They had nothing to do with the legislation, but ran the first national conference, did a lot of lobbying, sort of was the plumbing and pipes behind the formation of that industry. After that, I was invited to go back into academia, and I ran a research center at the Haas Business School, looking at innovative ways of financing entrepreneurship, not just crowdfunding, but tokenization, securitization, marketplace lending. And along the ways, I then started speaking all over the world and met these interesting creatures called family offices. And I didn't really know much about them since I was a tech guy, not a finance guy. But over the past several years, I've actually left academia, and most of my time is now spent either on social impact projects or in working with family offices and groups that serve family offices.
Yeah, I want to delve into this family office concept because this is an area that has been the center of focus recently with all the transition of wealth from one generation to the next. And then also there a lot of family offices have been direct investors, where before they were going through a lot of the venture and private equity groups. So right now you're working on creating a family office consortium, that a think tank per se. And can you explain the focus of where you feel the benefit will come by family offices collaborating together?
Yeah, there's two different things we're working on. I need to be a little bit careful because some of the partners haven't announced they're going to be leaving other positions yet, so this will sort of be a pre-announcement. But a group of us that are all mostly academics, Stanford, Berkeley, Cambridge, Oxford, pretty well-known universities. All of us are either members of family offices or work in the family office space. And we realize that a lot of family office advisors are very focused on narrowly selling a particular service, whether that's wealth advising or multi-generational planning or family legacy. And those are all valuable services, but we're basically going to create an ad hoc advisory firm where none of us are going to be doing it full time. It's going to essentially be a on-demand loose confederation of experts that are going to tackle some very interesting problems. One of the gentlemen involved is part of a network of 900 family offices and has spent years interviewing families globally, so he has a pretty good data set. And we find that a lot of families, as they move towards direct investing and moving away from reliance on advisors and away from reliance on venture funds, are really looking for a pool of expertise where they basically can ask for other advice on impact, or they can ask for advice on ESG monitoring, or they can ask for global political risk analysis, whatever the questions are that may be affecting their investment decisions. We're never going to manage money. We have no intention of becoming a money manager in RIA, but we think there's a lack of high quality information by people that really understand the family office industry.
What changed the world of investing under COVID?
Several things, and obviously there was a huge explosion of investing in opportunistic things like ed tech, remote conferencing. Uh, the vast majority of families um, liquidated a lot of their assets, moved to cash, and that has continued. A lot of people were investing heavily in gold. That is still continuing. I think the key change for me has been a massive increase in the trust that families and investors are putting in platforms, whether it's groups like ShareNet is a well-known platform that allows families to do direct investing together. There are others, but I like that one. But there's been a massive increase, if you will, it's almost crowdfunding for family offices where they're able to go on platforms. They have a broker dealer or a third party group that does the analysis and diligence for them, and then they co-invest. And most people aren't aware that family offices in the aggregate are multiple times, sorry, not articulate there, are investing multiple times more than venture capital funds these days. They're a substantial source of capital, making very large scale investments, and they have a very patient time frame and horizon. So a lot of the metrics and models that venture capital firms have always pushed aren't really the things that concern families. So I'm shocked by the willingness of families to invest through these platforms and online platforms. And I've seen an incredible uptake. I don't have specific data, but I would say, 5x, 10x what it was 18 months ago.
So you've been working on AI and artificial intelligence and collective reasoning for some time. Why the passion in this area? What is it that you're looking to drive?
Oh, thanks, Uriel. It's an interesting area, and I'm a geek in my um, heart of hearts. I still go back to technology for fun, but from a business point of view, AI is poorly understood, oftentimes maladapted, and it's used to solve the wrong problems with a limited data set. So I'm really trying to look for those groups that have true expertise in understanding different ways of and business models of applying artificial intelligence. One of my favorites is a company I've been advising for several years called CrowdSmart, and they sort of have a counterintuitive approach to artificial intelligence where they have artificial intelligence operating against human input. So instead of relying on machine learning or neural nets or large collections of data looking for the needle in the haystack, they believe that humans are still going to have pattern recognition and abilities to make decisions, especially in unknown situations. For example, under COVID, where essentially all the strategies and playbooks had to be thrown out. The companies had to reinvent themselves on the fly, given situations that no one had ever anticipated before. So that we ran up against the limitations of AI and the limitations of strategy when all of a sudden the world economy just sort of stopped. So human collective intelligence is where you use artificial intelligence to improve the reasoning of humans. There's an AI, there's a Bayesian network, there's learning happening in the background, but instead of informing some random metric, which then is used by an algorithm to then make a decision, it actually provides output that's human understandable. It's not a black box. It's very easily to understand, and it improves humans. So I think that there's a strong case for this in any sort of a situation where you're making predictions on uncertainty, whether it's political uncertainty or predicting prices in markets, or whether it's trying to make complex financial decisions. I've heard of and I'm aware of projects at the World Bank, at the United Nations, inside intelligence agencies, inside governments, inside the departments of defense, where they're trying to understand how AI can make human decision makers and human leaders better. So for me, that's a fascinating way of thinking about AI, which is counterintuitive for most people. And I believe that honestly, we need to do a better job of getting humans and computers to work together as opposed to just trusting in the power of the machines.
In our recent conversations, we've discussed Europe and European investments. And can you give us your assessment or take on what's happening in that sector of the world?
Well, I'm not a macroeconomist, but I've been learning from and working with a number of very large family offices, and I've been very interested to see how many of them are heavily investing in Europe. I don't know if that's just a political risk mitigation strategy they have, but I have seen that many European funds and fund of funds and investment strategies And again, I need to be careful. Many of these are opportunities that are only available to ultra high net worth investors or family offices. These are not retail investments. But I've been exposed to and am aware of significant opportunities in the European capital markets that far outperform American markets. And frankly, I'm actually very happy with the segregated accounts and some of the reporting and the requirements of third-party auditing. America sort of has a securities environment based on buyer beware and tons and tons and tons of disclosures. But I think the Europeans have built an architecture that does protect investors. Um, and I'm frankly more surprised. I'm surprised that a lot of other families in America are not heavily investing in these projects. One of which I ran across, and this isn't an endorsement, but just an example, is a group called Swiss Alpha, and I've met the leaders of that group, and I'm very impressed with their structures and their performances, and uh, they're far outperforming almost everything I see here in the U.S. So I think it may be somewhat political, and it may be somewhat matter of more saner and easier to understand regulations. But regardless, I'm seeing a lot of interest in and a lot of investment in Europe, more so than I would have expected. Traditionally, people think about putting money into American markets. I think there's more of a flow out of American markets than a lot of people realize right now.
So, what are the key technological disruptions that either excite you or keep you up at night?
Well, one of my problems, Alan, is I've got a lot of friends that work in three-letter agencies and a lot of ex-Navy SEAL types. So sometimes my friends accuse me of being a little bit pessimistic because of the crowds I hang around. But I think there's a couple of massive threats to the world economy. The first of which is the Chinese dominance of the internet and their intention of bifurcating or splitting the internet. There's going to be a Chinese-controlled internet, and there's going to be a U.S.-controlled internet, and they intend to launch their own, a new architecture of the internet for their allies, for companies doing business with them, for trade partners. Essentially, they are going to have an active splitting of the internet into two literally incompatible domains where the data can't be exchanged between them. And that's going to cause huge repercussions on trade and finance. They're also shifting their currency into a digitized format. That is part and parcel of this shift towards controlling e-commerce and controlling world markets. They intend to do everything they can to boot the dollar as the reserve currency in the world. And they have no qualms about stealing, hacking, and destroying their opponents. So I don't think this is going to be a friendly bifurcation. I think it's going to be a really messy cyber warfare. And we've been in cyber war with Russia for 20 years. It's nothing new, but the Chinese have been getting more and more aggressive. So from a geopolitical risk and from a bifurcation point of view, I don't think most people know that this bifurcation is coming probably in the next couple of years. And then secondly, both exciting and worrisome is we are in an arms race with China on quantum computing. Quantum computing is here. I don't think most people understand it, and this certainly isn't the show to go into the nuances of what makes quantum computing so powerful. But right now, the Chinese are far ahead of us, far, far, far ahead of us in the performance of their machines. And there's a certain point at which about a 20 qubit advantage where that advantage will probably never be able to be caught up. But the change in technology that's going to be driven by quantum computing is going to be as serious as going from hardware to the launch of the personal computers. I mean, the quantum revolution that's about to happen is going to totally remake almost all computing prediction systems. Um, you know, tens of thousands of fold increase in computing power, about hundreds of thousands fold increase in what companies are going to be able to do very quickly. So there's a massive technological change, which is going to make us rethink how we use computing systems and how we use computers for predictions. The question is going to be, are we going to be able to maintain some dominance of that industry, or is China going to own the industry? And if they can own that industry and own the internet, we're going to have a world of hurt.
Well, you're known as a global leader on platform investing. And this COVID, the last 12 months, has really caused an explosion in this area. So you've touched a little bit on that. But if we look into the crystal ball of the future, and I realize it's a prediction like an economist, where do you see this whole
Yeah,
heading right now?
I think that Platform-based investing is going to be the dominant model for most individuals. I still think institutions are going to rely on their standard processes and structures, but excuse me, high net worth individuals are certainly open to and have been using, Zoom platforms, whether it's through an angel network or Karitsu forum or family office networks. There's been a huge increase in the willingness of investors to be on those platforms. And because of that, there's been a dramatic increase in the quality of the due diligence, the quality of the screening, and the quality of the companies that are willing to go on those platforms. Originally, one of the challenges was that companies perceived it as almost like a selection bias, and only poor quality companies that can't get money anywhere else would dare to use those platforms. Now we're seeing that very aggressive companies realize it's an efficient way of raising capital. Capital formation is a huge distraction for startups and for early stage companies. And if they're able to use these platforms and do what took them, 9 months in the past and 30 roadshows within 2 weeks and 4 or 5 Zoom calls, it allows them to focus on execution as opposed to capital raising. So higher quality companies are using them. We're seeing a massive increase. I'm personally aware of at least 6 large networks with hundreds of family offices in each of the networks that are doing syndicated investing through these through their own version of a platform. So part of what we're seeing is a shift towards trusting other people's diligence, third-party diligence as a service, where in the past most families and high net worth individuals were less willing to trust. We're seeing a high amount of deal flow and volume. There's also been a lot of discussion around gender equity, and this isn't a politically correct statement, but it's just a very germane topic of conversation, and in that female-led businesses and female-founded companies are having a pretty good shake on these platforms, whereas historically when they go to roadshows, they don't do as well. So I think it's changing the ability of innovative companies to get funded regardless of the characteristics of the founder. And I think that's a good thing. There's a lot of women who have fascinating and awesome ideas that have had a challenge getting funded in the past. I think that families still basically travel as tribes. I mean, they have their network of friends, and some of them are multi-generational relationships, and they tend to invest together and travel together. I think these platforms are just taking some of the friction costs out of what they traditionally do anyway. I still think you're going to have gatherings, but a lot of families are willing to look at secondaries and direct investing through a platform rather than relying on, the 2,000 deals a day that get emailed into them. I'm exaggerating, of course, but they have no shortage of deal flow. So I think that psychological shift and technological shift and quality shift have all really driven the willingness of people to look at platform investing in a way that several years ago I never would have predicted.
Richard, how does the family office reach out to you for more information or to collaborate with the projects you're working on?
For now, it's just Richard at Swart, and that's SWART.com. I've not very active on social media. I find it to be a huge distraction. So I'm on LinkedIn and I have a website, and those are really the only ways that people can reach out to me. The think tank will be announced in a few months when we get it together, but for now, that's the best way.
Again, Richard, thanks for being with us today.
That's always a pleasure, Alan. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you.